Okay, I'm Brie. I work for Life in Vacant Spaces, as Barnaby said. I'm the project manager for Life in Vacant Spaces. We're a pretty small team of two. So there's myself and Jane Gregg, who's the director. We've been an organization now for about a year and a half. So we've been an organization for about a year and a half. In our first year, just getting up and running, there's a lot of figuring out who we were and who we were working with and how we fit into the whole puzzle. I guess for us coming in a bit later in the game than a lot of the transitional groups that emerged just post-quake. But now I think that it's been about a year and a half we're kind of starting to find our feet. So my job, I broker access to vacant space, which sounds like a really funny thing to do, and that's why I always use this picture. There might be a bit of repetition from Barnaby's presentation, but because I think it's important to understand the context and how many vacant spaces that we actually have, especially in the CBD. And I think in the suburbs, there are still a lot of people living out there, and there's a lot of really amazing community groups that have emerged post-quake, and they're doing a lot of similar work to what we're doing. But in the CBD, I don't have the statistics, but there's not that resident organization. There's not that drive from people actually living there, and so that's part of why we were founded is to address these vacant spaces in the CBD and make people or allow people to participate more in the recovery in the CBD. So yeah, brokering access to vacant space. So a bit of background. Gatfiller, Barnaby talked a little bit about them. They emerged after the September quake. And basically they're just a group of people that were thinking about what they would like to see in their city, what kind of city they would want to live in, and then they just started creating it. And what they found from that, Gatfiller is involved in a lot of their own projects. They design and manage and run their own projects. And they found that there is this massive community desire, so there were a lot of other people that wanted to do the same kind of thing. But then there's all of these background things that need to happen before you're able to run a project. So finding sites takes time. Land ownership in the CBD especially is very complicated at the moment. There's many layers. Even finding out who owns a site, finding their email contact or their phone number. It might be a property development trust overseas that just really doesn't have any understanding of the local context. Also insurance and legal hoops. And also running their own projects. Even if you have a food caravan, you may know how to run a business and how to make your food and plan your menu. But when you're working on a vacant site, there might not be access to utilities or services. There might be, rebar, parts of foundations. I mean, even like trying to level the site and grade it and prepare it for opening a business takes a lot of work. So there's a lot of background work. So Gatfiller was working with Christchurch City Council, and they did a report about similar organizations overseas. And they recommended to council that Life in Vacant Spaces be created. And so we're based heavily on an organization called Renew Newcastle. And Newcastle was not dealing with a post-disaster recovery, but they were dealing with economic downturn. So they had a lot of vacant built spaces. And what they did is they make those spaces available for free on a temporary basis to local entrepreneurs and artists and anyone who applies, basically. Just with the understanding that by creating a buzz around the space, it'll make it a more desirable place to be, and it'll be able to be tenanted. Some of these shops have been vacant for a very long time, and now they're starting to see a lot of interest in it from commercial tenants as well. And Newcastle isn't the only place they do this. It's pretty common these days, actually, in the States and also in Europe as well. In Newcastle, they had empty buildings, but in Christchurch, this is a good example of what we have. So obviously, when you're trying to plan your business, there are all these other things to consider, which I kind of went over a little bit. So this is basically what we do. So not, like in addition to liaising with the landowners, there's also CIRA, which owns like a good deal of the property in the city at the moment. And then also negotiating with council. And yeah, as I said, there's many different layers to that land negotiation. Also, a lot of property developers are stuck at the moment in insurance issues. They don't know when they're going to be able to develop. They don't know what they're going to do with their land or when they may do something with it. And they also may have plans to sell it. And so there are all of these different considerations that they're thinking through as well. And we help people through the liability and other insurances. Most people that we work with don't even realize you need to have these things, so it's a bit of a shock for them when they realize that's another few $100s. So that's something that we give support with. Legal agreements, most of our properties that we manage are available on a rolling 30-day lease. And that was based on the other examples like Renew Newcastle. For us now, we always try to negotiate for longer because it's easy to clear out a shop within 30 days, but when you've had to, put in access to power and you are adding all of this amenity by cleaning the site and leveling the ground, and it sometimes it would be ideal if we had more than 30 days notice. I think when you have when you know you're going to have a few months on a site, it allows you to do a lot more with it. Materials and services support. We're developing connections with professional services and also with sponsors who can provide materials. And also just guidance during planning stages. Once the project is on the ground, we have almost nothing to do with it. Because the idea is that we make these spaces available to people who are capable and determined to run their own projects. But during the planning stages, I do tend to work quite closely with them. And so why is this important? So for the community as a whole, what we're really trying to do is foster this culture of participation and production. And I think a lot of people feel left out of the recovery process. And it's important to be able to actually come in and have an idea about what you would like to see in the city and be able to take part in producing it. Also encouraging exploration of the city. Like for me, I live and work in the CBD, and I'm always surprised by people who do not go into the city center anymore, which is, other than, the colleagues that I work with in the transitional movement, I would say most people that I know in town do not go into the city center. And so for us, it's really important to encourage exploration of the city. Like there actually are a lot of cool things that are happening, and I think a lot of people in Christchurch are not even aware of some of these projects. Connect neighborhoods and provide public spaces. So yeah, just as I was saying before, there are not as many people living in the CBD anymore. And so it's important, especially when you have all of these really raw vacant spaces, to actually provide areas that people can walk through and enjoy, really. Express community character. A lot of the things that are proposed to me are things that I never would have even thought of. And it's just very authentic and very Christchurch, and I think that that's really important as well. And cities that provide opportunities for innovators will attract entrepreneurs internationally. So I think we've gotten a lot of good press internationally. Actually, we were just in New York Times as one of the top 10 cities to visit, I think, in 2014, and because of Gap Filler's efforts, we were mentioned in Lonely Planet as one of the top 10 cities to visit in 2013. And I think that if we're seen as that kind of city that fosters these kind of creative projects, then people will come from overseas and want to be a part of it, and we have seen that. For the project participants, it's an opportunity to trial an idea. And it's also, if somebody wants to start a business, a low-risk means to test a brand and gain visibility. And it's also a lot of collaboration and idea sharing with other participants. I've noticed on these vacant spaces, the ones that are, I don't like saying the most successful, but for lack of better words, the ones that really work the best are really collaborative efforts. So not only is there a team managing one project, there might be a team that does some landscaping or has a garden, and then there might be another team that runs a business. There might be another team that runs an event or a market there. And so it's not just a team collaborating on one project, but it's many different teams collaborating on many different projects and figuring out how they fit together. And then also just creative expression and a means to participate in the reimagination of the city. This picture is actually one of my favorite projects. It was called Temple for Christchurch, and it was based on the premise of the Burning Man Festival, which happens in the States. And so basically they create this big wooden structure, and they open it for 2 weeks, and people can write on it, write whatever they want, and it could be related to their earthquake experiences, or it could just be anything from their life that they want to let go of. And then after the 2 weeks, they took it out to the raceway and they burned it in an absolutely amazing bonfire. He wanted to find a place to be able to burn it in the city. That ended up being slightly too difficult for us. We figured out the only place big enough to actually do that was Hagley Park, and that probably wouldn't have gone over very well. So, yeah. So we had to build it in the city, deconstruct it, and rebuild it out at the raceway, but it was pretty amazing. And then for the landowners, a lot of people say, well, why would the landowners do that, And sometimes it is just goodwill, and a lot of the landowners that we've worked with are the landowners in Christchurch who are local and maybe just own one parcel of land. The larger property development trusts are sometimes not as understanding of the context, but we find the local landowners generally are, and they do have that goodwill and that interest in making the space available. But even on top of goodwill, I think it is really beneficial for them as well, because it's just about creating a buzz around the space and making it a place that people would want to be and would want to develop. And so this is actually a picture of my favorite. It's like a food truck mecca. It's where I used to live in Austin, Texas. And this quote from the landowner who owns the space. So our goal is to create revenue while investing as little as possible, attract some food vendors, and collect ground lease rent to cover our costs. It's worked fantastically. Having an interim use option allows the neighborhood to evolve to appropriate density, land values, market demographic, to the point where conditions are right to develop the property. And that's something that we really try to talk to landowners in Christchurch about now. Yeah. And so just to go through a few of the projects we've been involved with, which have been at all different scales, some of them very large scale, some very small, some have had a lot of funding, some pretty much none. Some people have had years of experience behind them doing similar things, and some people are just jumping off the deep end, really. So this is a youth theater company that we've worked with a couple times called Two Productions. And they're just absolutely amazing. The playwrights are in their early 20s, and all of their actors are high school students. And they ran an event with us in 2012, or beginning of 2013, I think. 2012, and then another one just last year. And this was an interactive play they did. It was really good. This is another gap filler project. It's a community bike workshop. So you can come, they have all the tools, you can come in and bring your bike and learn how to fix it. And then what I love is that some of these projects, especially the ones that hold regular hours or have a presence on the site, like this community bike workshop, they kind of develop their own projects around it. So then in this case, they have markets with vintage clothing and crafts and cakes and Then sometimes there's a taco truck there as well. And so a lot of these spaces end up just really having a life of their own. This was a band who wanted to film a music video. And it was really cool because for them, they had never done anything like this before. And previously, we'd worked with a Fledge production company who run events quite often and had done a couple of events through us in Vacant Sites. And so I was able to have the managers from this band meet with the production company and kind of share their knowledge about working in the vacant spaces. And so that was really good. And that's something we try to do as well. If somebody's run a project through us before, then they then become a mentor for somebody who's doing it for the first time. And this is another one of my favorites. This is The Social is an arts collective in town, and they run an international artist residency. And so the caravan kind of travels around to different vacant sites in the city, and an artist lives there for a week at a time and then kind of creates work responding to being in that space. We found out you're not allowed to live on vacant spaces because we get requests quite often of people who want to do that. But you can if it's a week and it's within a self-contained caravan. So, yeah. And just some of the barriers as well, time frames. You know, some of this land will likely be vacant for years and years and years, but landowners will only give us, you know, the rolling 30 days, or 3 months, rolling 3 months, or, you know, 6 months if we're lucky. And obviously there is a lot more opportunity to do more complex projects that are more engaging when you do have that longer time frame. And so we're really trying to push that now to, you know, be more realistic in how long the land might be available. Utilities access. Before this, I had absolutely no idea how complicated it was and how many different layers there were to utilities access on these sites. And that's a piece of the puzzle we haven't really figured out yet. Occasionally, it's possible to plug in a temporary power supply box, but not as often as I would like. Building consents, like Barnaby said, there's some micro-architecture and different things like that where consents are not needed, but then even for a container, now we've gotten it to the point where you can get an exemption instead of a consent, but it's still very complicated, and of course that adds, you know, months and, you know, sometimes quite a bit of money to this work, and also the complexities of land ownership, which I've kind of gone over. So, yeah, and that's all I have.